In June of 2014 at E3, when that was still a thing, people were reeling from the lackluster release of Dark Souls 2, which wasn't directed by Hideki Miyazaki. A new IP was revealed, Bloodborne, and showed three things that people were clamoring for at the time: Victorian era, gothic horror, guns, and trick weapons. The tagline: "The hunt begins."
May you find your worth in the waking world.
2015 was the release year for Bloodborne. Now, 10 years later, players have been begging for an update, a re-release, or just a 60 FPS patch. Anything! The fans, however, have had enough and pulled down the gauntlet and said, "Fine, I'll do it myself." The insanely capable fans took a new work-in-progress emulator from being able to just barely limp to the title screen in June of 2024 to the game now being almost 100% playable with very few crashes. If that doesn't show how much these dedicated people have been in love with the game, I don't know what will.
But where's an outsider like yourself to begin?
A little background. Back in 2020, Lance McDonald said to the world, "Hey Sony, I hacked my PlayStation 4 and got Bloodborne to play at 60 FPS. If you do not want me to release this 60 FPS crack, release a 60 FPS patch for the PlayStation 5 version of the game." 6 months later, with no PS5 patch, Lance then shared his code with the world. A valiant first step. A year later, a developer named George Morales, a former dev on PCSX1 and PCSX2, started work on a new emulator, this time for the PlayStation 4. 2.5 years later, on July 2nd, 2024, George released the 0.10 version of ShadPS4, expecting just to show off a few 2D games working on the emulator and some very light 3D games. People rapidly pivoted to their one waking desire: where is Bloodborne on the PC? Developers rushed to the distro on GitHub and got to work getting Bloodborne playable. Now, with the release of ShadPS4 version 0.50, the game is now in a fully playable state. And I was very keen to test the validity of this hastily created work-in-progress port of Bloodborne on the PC. I knew there could be many problems, crashes, and visual bugs. Oh, we got a crash. Hands up. Before I get to my experiences with the Bloodborne on PC port, let's get to why you're all here. How can you play Bloodborne on the PC? And is it a better experience than what can be found on the PlayStation 4 and PS5 code?
It always comes down to the hunter's helper to clean up after these sorts of messes. Tonight, Gammon joins the hunt.
First, you're going to need to download ShadPS4, which can be found in the links in the description below or at shadps4.net. Head to the downloads page and download specifically the GUI version of ShadPS4, which is known as the QT version. There is a Windows, Linux, and macOS version of ShadPS4, but I'm going to be focusing on the Windows release. But I'm sure a lot of what I'm showing will work on the other versions of ShadPS4. Next, you're going to need to source a ROM of Bloodborne by either using a modded PS4 to get the PKG files or through some other internet means, which I cannot help you with due to legal reasons. This will give you a .pkg file for the Bloodborne base game and the latest version that includes the Old Hunter DLC. Drag the base PKG file into the GUI for ShadPS4. This will give you a prompt for where you want to install your Bloodborne game. I recommend keeping it close to the main directory of ShadPS4 because we will be modifying these files later. Next, drag the update file for Bloodborne to version 1.09. This will include the files for the Old Hunter DLC, but they do not necessarily give access to be able to play them just yet. Now for the important stuff. Right-click on your Bloodborne game in the GUI, then click on the Cheats and Patches option. This will give you a new window which we'll use to get the most out of your game without excessive modding. Call it the Vanilla Plus version of the game. Down at the bottom of this window, there is a repository select option. Select Gold Hen, then click on Download Patches. This will download all the patches and cheats associated with this repository. Next, change from Gold Hen to ShadPS4 and do the same thing. We now have 2 repositories of cheats and patches to improve the base game of Bloodborne. At the top of this window, there are 2 tabs, Cheats and Patches. Cheats are useful for messing around with, and patches are what we really care about. Gold Hen has less patches than ShadPS4, but they are useful for our Vanilla Plus vibe that we're going for. From here, we can select proper frame pacing, which fixes From Software's weird 29 FPS cap that is in the Bloodborne code, and corrects it to a proper 30 FPS. Next, we can then disable chromatic aberration, which is a massive eyesore and causes headaches for a lot of players, myself included. And then finally, force enable the Old Hunters DLC. You can now also see an option which is Lance McDonald's 720p patch, if you are so inclined, but honestly, we're going to be skipping that and keep the renderer to its base 1080p state. You'll now have a working, playable, Vanilla Plus version of the game, and you can just hit play and enjoy the game working on your PC. The supposed minimum specs for ShadPS4 is a CPU of 2.5 GHz, 4 cores and 6 threads, and a GPU of less than 1 GB of VRAM, but I would not agree with this as a true minimum playable spec. If you have a computer with these specs, give it a go, let me know. But I personally think if you have a GPU that's better than 10 series from NVIDIA, or a CPU that was released after Bloodborne came out 10 years ago, you should be fine. Now, you have launched the game, you may have noticed some issues. The first issue you probably will have noticed is a sound issue. You'll be noticing a lack of audio in certain aspects of the game, specifically footsteps and your weapon not making sounds when you swing it. If you aren't having these issues, you can ignore these next few steps, but I recommend that you still download the files in the link in the description below. There are about 1 GB of sound files. They may be important to you later. Hey, this is post-recording of the audio. Kris here in middle of editing. There is a new thing on Nexus Mod called Bloodborne Launcher and Mod Manager, and this Mod Manager supposedly will fix the sound glitching after 60 FPS crashes happen. So it's in the description below. I haven't tested it out myself, but hopefully this mod manager will also make it easier to install the various other mods such as Bloodborne Enhanced and Vertex Explosion Fix, which I'll be talking about later in the video. Alright, that's enough from me. If you do have these audio issues, you're going to need to download these same sound files I was just referring to in the link in the description below. And once you've downloaded these files, you need to extract them into a folder. Next, you need to copy these files from inside this folder into your base Bloodborne install folder, DVD root _PS4/sound, and then replace the broken FSB files with these new FSB files. When the game crashes, these same audio files might break again, and you may have to redo this step. This is why I recommend everyone download these files in case of a crash and these audios breaking. Another issue that you may notice from time to time is Vertex Explosions. They look like a weird wall of texture stretching out into the distance. These are called Vertex Explosions. Most are caused by custom face models for the player model, including NPCs that use the custom player model as their base. This does not, however, affect bosses or normal mobs that you fight. To fix this issue almost entirely, we will use a Vertex Explosion Fix mod from Nexus Mods. The link can be found in the description below. Like the sound fix, we're going to be copying some files from this mod and pasting them into a folder. This folder can also be found in the DVD root _PS4 folder, and the one that we're going to be replacing this time is called Parts. We will then paste all the Vertex Explosion DCX files into this Parts folder and replace all the files. I should warn you that when you replace all these files, it will remove all the player faces from the game, leaving you with this eerie, vacuous void where the face once was. And maybe you can live with the occasional Vertex Explosion rather than using this mod.
We are born of the blood. made men by the blood, undone by the blood. Our eyes are yet to open. Fear the old blood.
Now, what makes this release even better than the PlayStation 4 version is once we have a working model, we can now start to push the game a little bit harder and make it look even better than the PS4 base code. Switch repositories from Goldhen to ShadPS4, which can be done in the select patch file at the bottom of the window here. Now there will be more things to patch the game with, starting with a 60 FPS with delta time patch. This will uncap the frame rate to 60 FPS when possible. Scrolling down this list, we can see a bunch of resolution patches. Here we can change the internal resolution of the game from 360p all the way up to 4K and use ultra wide or 4:3 aspect ratios. This is the end of the beginner changes, and everything beyond this is not recommended and it's up to the user's preferences with variable results. On Nexus Mods, there is a vast community of modders who are attempting to fix or improve Bloodborne. Some of the better, more promising ones are Bloodborne Enhance, which adds a lot of functionality to the Hunter's Lamp, including leveling up and resting, to reduce how often you need to go to the Hunter's Dream. It also adds a new lamp in the Hunter's Dream where you can rematch with previous bosses you have beaten. Another possible mod you might be interested in is the Bloodborne Remaster project. In this mod, a user is attempting to manually up-res all the textures in the game to look more modern, and also add more complex lighting, AO, and anti-aliasing to the game compared to its PlayStation 4 code. Lastly, there are various reshade presets for the game, and yes, reshade is compatible with ShadPS4. It doesn't have an internally tied application like DuckStation, but maybe in the future there will be. This should be all you need to know for playing Bloodborne on the PC. However, the emulation as of version 0.5.0 is not perfect, and I have done a full playthrough of Bloodborne, beating every possible boss, and I'll now list all the problems that I have experienced, starting from the most important to the least important. First, the 60 FPS is not locked. Do not expect a magical, perfect 60 FPS experience. There are many parts of the game where the game will run at a stable 60 FPS, and when it does, it looks fantastic. But that doesn't always lead to a great experience, because you will notice these very noticeable drops. You'll be facing a wall and see lovely 60 FPS, and then you will turn down an alleyway where there are a few AI mobs on the screen and the frame rate will just plummet below 60 FPS, and this will make you feel the difference in frame rate, leading to a very juddery experience. The 60 FPS cap is also not always perfectly synced to the game time, which in certain areas looks like the character model and the camera do not move in sync with the frame rate. It can be quite easily seen, at least to my eye, in the middle Murgo loft area. You may not be as sensitive to these issues as I am, but I noticed this in a few other places as well. This is why I recommend using the 30 FPS frame time fix instead of the 60 FPS delta time at this moment, or at least be aware of the potential downsides to the 60 FPS patch. I have also done some light testing with different internal resolutions, and it didn't seem to exacerbate the issue or make it better or make it worse. This could be a hardware or emulation issue. Considering that ShadPS4 is early in development, it could be either. For reference, I am using a Ryzen 5900X and NVIDIA RTX 3090. I was also streaming and recording my footage at the same time. In one boss fight, the Iberothalis, Daughter of the Cosmos, I saw my frame rate drop below 30 FPS. This may not happen to everyone, but this was the lowest I ever personally saw it go. Another issue that I experienced was random crashes that would bug the audio out in my game after the crash, making weapon sounds and footsteps stop working, and I would have to then replace the audio files in the sound folder. These crashes would happen seemingly at random and were near impossible to replicate throughout my playthrough. I think it happened about 12 times, I would say, and it would be about once every 2 to 3 hours. The worst crash being on my final day of playing the game, after I finished fighting Gurman the Hunter and the moon presence showed itself, it had crashed my entire computer. Other than these crashes, the only game-breaking bug I found throughout my entire playthrough was when I was attempting to fight Laurance the First Vicar. It refused to load the cutscene before the fight, leaving me with just a black screen and light fire audio in the background. It did not actually crash the ShadPS4, instead it just soft locked it on the screen. I would have to then manually close ShadPS4 and then relaunch ShadPS4. Thankfully, this puts you right before the cutscene, allowing you to continue playing without beating Laurance the First Vicar. Hey, it's post-edit Kris here again. I found the solution for the soft lock of Laurance the First Vicar. It has to do with the Delta patch 60 FPS. Just disable it, enter the fight, and then quit, re-put the 60 FPS patch on, and then re-enter the fight after the cutscene's over, and the problem is solved. And this is what you get when you actually read the patches and the notes they have associated with them. Alright, back again. Back to the video. This is about it for my report on the progress on Bloodborne PC Edition. With the 10th anniversary coming this year, I strongly recommend you replaying Bloodborne using ShadPS4. Even with all these issues, with how fast the emulation progress has been, I'm expecting by the time the Bloodborne 10th anniversary happens, this emulation may be even better than it is today. Good day, have a good one, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye bye.
Master, look! I've done it! I've done it! I've smashed and pounded and grounded this rotten siren into fleshy pink pulp! There, you filthy monstrosity! What good's your immortality now? Try stirring up trouble in this sorry state! All mangled and twisted, with every inside on the outside for all the world to see?